Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory. Today, this is going to be the first episode of an unsolved mystery in my podcast. If you are interested in ASMR content, as always, there will be a new video with a true crime case on Monday and Friday. This is just extra content for those of you guys who requested to have the podcast here on my channel. So I hope that you join me in this case and we can go through what happened to this girl and how she disappeared into thin air. Not only her, but also her car. And what has been done 30 years later to find out who actually killed her or had something to do with her disappearance. So I hope that you join me, and thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you back on Friday. Bye guys. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mystery Theory podcast. Today we're going to talk about an unsolved mystery. And this one in particular, it happened a long time ago. However, I feel like these cases that are very old sometimes get forgotten, and 20, 30 years later, we can find, they find their remains, but we can never understand what really happened. Well, recently, I kind of stumbled upon a new investigation on an older case that happened in the UK, and that it really haunted me for a while because I feel like, people disappear all the time, but this girl disappeared and her car too, and was never found, which is very odd, very different. And I feel like, it's just one of those things that it always worried me, because I'm like, how can a car disappear? It was a very particular car. It was painted in a very particular way. So how can this car disappear? Well, we're going to go into the first part of this 3-part series, and we're going to not only cover what happened in the beginning, also the investigation in the beginning, but also how all that information helped 30 years later to find new leads in an old and very cold case. So, this story started in Eastbourne, East Sussex. I'm probably butchering that. Eastbourne, East Sussex. It's a seaside town that it's one of the safest place to live, or safest parts of the country to live in, at least at the time. According to Louise's parents, she was a very sweet girl that was always happy, smiling, and she was a bubbly girl. When she got older, she was pretty much the same way, but according to her dad, she was also a free spirit. She wasn't a bad daughter, she wasn't doing anything wrong, but she loved her freedom, and she loved to spend time with her friends and spend time outside the house. Now, her sister remembered that as she got older, she was always borrowing clothes and jewelry, makeup and stuff, because she loved to go clubbing with her friends. Before you say something, I have to make some things clear so everyone understands. The system around the world is not the same as here in the States. Most countries, at least in Europe, and I know that back home in South America, the legal age for you to go drinking is 18, and the legal age for you to go clubbing, therefore, is also 18. So she wasn't doing anything wrong, she wasn't doing anything illegal, and I sometimes get those comments that are kind of blaming the victim. I just don't get that, but she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was 18 and she was doing what she was doing, and what I did when I was 18 and even younger, and what most teenagers do when they want to have fun. On June 23rd, again, and it was legal. I'm not saying that you should do that if it's not legal where you live. I just wanted to make those things clear so you get a different perspective in this. Now, on June 23rd, 1988, she got ready and left the house for a kind of routinely going out evening with friends that she, it was almost every other weekend or every weekend that she would get together with her friends and try to go to this particular club or bar. The dad remembers that it was later in the evening and that the last time he saw his daughter was when she reached actually the end of the garden, and before she got in her car, she turned around and waved goodbye. She was meeting her friend Sarah that night, and to have a little fun. It was usual that they would always hang out together. And according to a recent interview with Sarah, she mentioned that it was a regular night. They were having fun, drinks, and laughing, socializing. I mean, that's the kind of thing that they used to do. They didn't meet anybody new. It was pretty much a regular night. And when the night was over, Louise, Sarah, and their friends jumped in Louise's car, and Louise started to drop off her friends one by one. By the time they dropped everyone off, I should say, they went to Sarah's house, which Sarah assumed that she was spending the night there, that Louise was going to spend the night there. But Louise tells her that she wants to go to this place that is called Beachy Head. Now, of course, I've never been there, but according to my research, it's kind of a cliff that overlooks the ocean. It also has some trails and some things to walk, and it's a very nature kind of place. Sarah tells her that they spent the night there the night before and that she really doesn't want to go again. She asks Louise to please stay with her, but they have a little argument, and Louise tells her that she doesn't want to stay. She just wants to go and spend the night there inside her car. The argument finished with, fine, if you want to be like that. Now, she left Sarah's house, and that is the last time that anybody saw Louise or her car, for that matter, which was a gold Fiesta with a white door. And according to her dad, it was almost out of gas. And according to the dad, the condition of the car wasn't the best either. So she couldn't have traveled very far. The dad also said that in the beginning, he tried to explain that as maybe she left. They just couldn't believe that this could be happening to them. But how and why? Why would you leave? There weren't any signs or anything that would lead them to believe that she was unhappy and that she wanted to leave with a boy, or she wanted to leave by herself and move somewhere. But so again, she vanished. Her car vanished. So the police was contacted at the time. They went through as much as they could, but they had nothing to go on. So Louise's mom, her name is Sylvia, she took the initiative and she started writing a diary. This diary happened to be one of the key pieces in this recent investigation. But just so you have an idea, in the diary she wrote everything she did to try to find her daughter. She would check if her daughter got married, if she used her passport, if the car showed up impounded in a different city, in a different country, if the title was changed, maybe she sold the car. She had details, dates, time, and everything new in the investigation that not only the police conducted at the time, but also things that she was trying to investigate herself. Sadly, she died before finding out what happened to her daughter. But her diary, again, it's one of the most important things in this recent investigation. Now, in that diary, when it was taken by the private investigator 30 years later to try to find out what happened to her, the private investigator and his team found a couple of Scottish guys that were mentioned throughout the diary. The first one was a friend that she met at this Wimpy bar, which is the club bar thing that they were going to. And apparently that night this guy gave her money to put gas in her car, but that's as much as they knew. The mother always wondered if maybe they wanted to meet at Beachy Head, or maybe they planned to meet each other after the party or after the club and everything. But the guy giving her money, it could have been that he wanted a ride home and he just wanted to help out because she didn't have enough gas in her car. So that could be it as well. But they investigated this guy, and the police immediately realized that he had a very strong alibi, so they had to rule him out. There was nothing that they had nothing on this guy. But there was another Scottish man that happened to be the number one suspect back in 2007. His name is Peter Tobin, and he happened to be a convicted murderer. The Scottish police believe Peter Tobin was a serial killer who they knew killed at least 3 girls: 23-year-old Angelica Clark, Vicky Hamilton, and Dina McNichols. And they found the last 2 bodies, I believe, were in his house. He dug a couple graves in the backyard, and I'll go into details in a few minutes. But this happened only 3 years later, after Louise disappeared. So it could have, their paths could have been crossed along the way, and they did. So we're going to investigate that a little bit more. But again, 3 girls were killed by this guy. But when they questioned him with the idea of the possibility that maybe he did have something to do with Louise, he told them to F off and use their money and resources to find out what happened to her, and that he gave an F about the family. So that's the kind of guy that we're talking about here. We also know about this guy, or character for lack of a better word, that he moved all the time. He has registered over 30 addresses and over 20 aliases. He also had an extensive criminal history: theft, forgery, sexual offenses, and most recently murder. So in order to investigate this guy and try to connect and see if he had anything to do with the disappearance of Louise, we have to go to Glasgow, Scotland, one of the places that I really want to visit. Just kind of ruined it for me, but oh well. There, Peter Tobin was working for a church as a handyman, under the alias Pat McLaughlin. There was also a 23-year-old Polish student, Angelica Clark, who was also working for the church and sending money to her family in Poland. One Sunday afternoon, she offered to help the handyman, Pat, which actually was Peter Tobin, and he accepted. And while she was distracted, he hits her in the back of the head with a table leg. He then sexually assaulted her and then stabbed her 16 times. To make things worse, he decides then to put her in a tarp kind of thing and drags her to the church, which, by the way, this guy, had guts. Why would he put her in the church? Well, I'm going to explain what he did, but it almost feels like he's done this before, and he's okay with the idea. It's not like this is the first time that he's done this. So it's kind of interesting to know that, he was a little bit more comfortable in this case. And at the church, there was a hole in the floor, and there was a lot of garbage. And I don't know why, but I mean, there's a picture of the hole in the floor, and he decides to leave her there, which, by the way, it was almost like he wanted somebody to find it, because why would you put a body under a church and, you know, expect people not to find it? It's ridiculous. It's going to start to smell. He then cleaned his tracks, and the process, he did everything, you know, that he could, as far as the things that he used to kill her. So again, all this kind of points to the idea that maybe this is not the first time that he killed. Then they found the body of Angelica, and again, it was only a matter of time until her body started to smell bad. When they found her body, they also did find his DNA, and they were looking for him, and they finally found him under a different name in a hospital in London, and that's when they arrested him. The police, of course, they knew that this guy was no good, and they decided to go check his house in Margate, which is a town in the south coast of England. Remember that he had over 30 different addresses. In this particular house in Margate, they found the bodies of Vicky Hamilton and Dina McNichols. What is interesting to the police is that Margate is only 80 miles away from where Louise disappeared in Eastbourne. But was Peter Tobin even in the area when she disappeared? Well, we're going to go into that. But just so you know, this was in the area of Margate, only 80 miles away from where Louise disappeared. There were several witnesses that placed Peter Tobin in Eastbourne at the time, claiming that he worked for a while in a hotel in the area. He was also known to be working, I don't know if it was later or before the hotel, delivering cars for auctions. So he had to travel from one place to another, picking up cars in one area and driving them back to the auction. This made it very hard to trace this guy that not only moves a lot, but he has a lot of different aliases. There was also an eyewitness that claimed that Peter Tobin was selling a small car, and pay attention to this, that he hand painted himself, which kind of indicates or leads you to believe that this could be Louise's small car that had that very distinctive white door, and that is why he painted it. So it could be that. Investigators then moved to Peter Tobin's first wife, Margaret. And I mean, this guy, he's a piece of work, but she paints a horror story, okay? And again, we're kind of trying to find more and more information about this guy and the character and how he could have done it, and tried to get information to see if he was in the area where Louise disappeared. So, according to Margaret, she met Peter Tobin in a ball dance. He was described as a very handsome guy and a gentleman. They had a few months of courtship, and then one day he invited her to his apartment. She went, and they talked for about 2 hours, and when she mentioned that she had to go, he told her, "You're not going anywhere. You're mine now." According to Margaret, he kept her prisoner in his apartment for weeks. He raped her at knife point every night, every day actually, and on one occasion he accidentally stabbed her while raping her to the point that she was losing consciousness. There was so much blood that started to drip down into the neighbor's apartment downstairs. So the neighbor decided to call an ambulance that came, picked up Margaret, and took her to the closest hospital, where when she opened her eyes, to her surprise, Peter Tobin was there. And he told her, "Keep your mouth shut and I will talk to the police." She was so afraid of him that she did. And when she was strong enough to walk, he took her back to his apartment. She decided to do everything he wanted from there forward because she wanted to stay alive. And again, just so you have an idea, she was only 18 years old. She never mentioned this to her parents. She ended up getting married in Brighton. And according to Margaret, she didn't want to marry this guy, but she wanted to stay alive, so she did. A year later, she managed to leave him and never reported what he did to her to the police. She was so happy that she escaped him that she thought that if she said something, he was going to go and hunt her down. Now the investigators, again, they go and continue to investigate because, again, this is the kind of thing that it's kind of taking us to different places. Okay, so we did go to the ex-wife that, just told them that she didn't want to marry this guy, that it's kind of painting a horrible story for the police. And then we also need to go and find physical evidence, because even though this lady is telling us what happened according to her, the police still need different physical evidence to convict this guy for what happened to Louise. So the private investigator and his team decide to go back to Margate, where they found the bodies. And of course, another thing that it's very common is just to talk to the neighbors. And they talked to a particular guy that lived at the time that, this Peter Tobin was living there. And he mentioned quite a few things that were very disturbing to the private investigator. When Peter first moved, he brought back black garbage sacks. Now the neighbor didn't think anything of it because he thought, well, he's probably bringing still some stuff from his other home, and it's a guy kind of thing. Throw everything in a garbage bag and just be done with it. Another thing that he noticed is that he would never let anybody in the house. He would talk from the doorstep but never let anybody inside. He would never bring friends or family members. And one of the things that I'm like, what is this neighbor thinking? One day he saw Peter digging in the backyard and told his neighbor, what are you doing? Are you trying to get to Australia or something like that? And Peter turned around and said, I am building a sandbox for a little one. Which, by the way, it doesn't make sense because he didn't have a kid living with him there. And at the end of the day, that hole was covered with dirt. So a little bit fishy. And if I was the neighbor, I don't know if I would give him a pass when he said that kind of thing. When the police found the bodies later, on both of the bodies that were buried there, remember that Vicky was one of them. She was only 15 years old and Dina was only 18 years old. Again, younger girls that kind of fit into an MO per se of this guy, and also kind of fitted the idea of the disappearance of Louise. Now, Dina disappeared on her way back home from a music festival, so they think that maybe she got a lift from Peter and he ended up sexually assaulting her and then killing her. We know that he transported Vicky from Scotland to Margate, okay, because that's where he found Vicky, or where Vicky was at the time. And we know that he kept her body for about 6 weeks before moving it to Margate. to the point that the neighbors reported a bad smell in the area that eventually went away. So maybe he did keep her in Scotland for those weeks, but then decided to move it to Margate and kind of dig something in the backyard and put her body there. We know that he was living in Portslade, Brighton, when Louise disappeared. That's as much as we know, going back to Louise's investigation. And again, he was living in Portslade, Brighton, when she disappeared. And the police did dig in that particular address, but they couldn't find Louise. So that's why, they believe that he had something to do with Louise. That's why they were digging there, but they just couldn't find her body. So the private investigators were starting to come up with the theory that maybe what happened to Vicky happened to Louise. Think about it. He found Vicky in Scotland and he kept her for about 6 weeks before taking her to Margate to dig and, just put her there. So is it possible that maybe he kept Louise in Portslade, Brighton, for a few weeks and then transported her somewhere else? Remember that he had over 30 addresses and that he was moving around a lot. Now, when the private investigator, this is in the recent investigation, looked for the next address, he also wanted to look for a property that was not forensic search, okay? There were a lot of those properties, those 30 properties were forensic search, which makes sense. But he wanted to find one that maybe wasn't, and he did find one. And this is in Windlesham Road. So he decided, the private investigator and his team, to go visit the house. When they arrived there, and this is 30 years later, the owner wasn't there, but he contacted him and he said, you can go look in the backyard, but I don't want any cameras on it. So right now it almost feels like we're getting somewhere, because we have the background of Vicky that was killed in Scotland, but then was moved to Margate in England. And we have a lot of things that kind of make sense that, he was living close by, that he could have been around the area where she was sleeping or Louise was sleeping that night. So, this is kind of getting to the point that it seems like we're getting somewhere, So the private investigator requests, he asked for permission for a search. And he is denied by the owners because the tenants didn't want to deal with it. They also said that if the police wanted to do it themselves, they would allow it, but they don't want a private investigator to dig or do anything to their property unless it's something that the police needs to do. When the private investigator tried to get the police on board, the police didn't want to do it. So it was kind of one of those moments that you're like, I'm really, really close to finding out what really happened. Could it be that she's buried in this address the police never checked? Could it be that maybe there is something here that would indicate that maybe this guy killed more people than the ones that we know that he did? Could this be a serial killer with, tens of, 10, 12, 30 people that he killed and we have no idea? Why didn't the police look into this property? Why didn't they dig this property? Now, of course, this was a dead end for the investigation, 30 years later with the private investigators. But of course, they needed to find another way to try to get not the permission, but more information so maybe they could get the police on board. So they started to look for people that disappeared in the area around the time that Louise disappeared. Again, they were trying to show a pattern so maybe they can start digging or, getting a little bit of the police help. So in 1989, the private investigators were going through the newspapers, people that disappeared, people that were found at the time, and they found that in 1989, a father and his daughter were at Beachy Head hiking, and they found human remains. When the police investigated, they concluded that was the body of a 22-year-old girl. Her name was Jessie Earl, and she went missing actually in 1980, so 9 years before they found her body. Now, that specific place happened to be the area where Louise disappeared. So 9 years later, after Jessie disappeared, Louise happened to disappear in the same place. Now, when the police investigated the case of Jessie, they came to the conclusion that her death was suspicious, but not murder. When the investigators visited her parents, they described her as a sweet, quiet girl that loved nature. And the parents, they were just a sweet couple, and older couple, and you could see how much pain they were. It's unbelievable how can so many years pass and you can kind of relive the pain of losing a child this way. The parents told the private investigator that she disappeared on May 15th, 1980. And the investigators also, the parents told the investigators that she would love to go to Beachy Head to observe nature. But that is not necessarily where she disappeared. So it could have been that she was somewhere else and her remains were just dropped in the area. Now, also in 1989, when they discovered her remains, her parents knew that somebody killed her. But the police wasn't so sure at the time. In the year 2000, this is just mind-boggling, but when a detective investigated and found that her bra was tight and that it was probably what it was restraining her, they ruled this a murder. So this girl that they found in 1989 in the same place where Louise disappeared, this girl Jessie, who was only 22 years old, at first they said that it was a suspicious death, but now in the year 2000, many years after, they realized that it wasn't, and that she was tied with her own bra. They didn't treat this as a murder in the beginning, so they didn't save any evidence. They found, careful enough to use it. I don't think that they even kept the bra. Could have had any kind of DNA of whoever killed her, but they don't have that. Now, what does this have to do with Peter Tobin? Well, he happened to live nearby this girl's town at the time that she disappeared, and he also happened to live nearby Louise's house at the time that she disappeared. This doesn't prove anything, but they need to dig a little bit deeper. So now they're trying to go over 1,500 unsolved mysteries in the UK, and they're trying to eliminate the ones that don't fit the criteria, like they need to be between 14 and 35, and they need to be females. And even though they do have a criteria, it's so broad that investigators need to go through it very thoroughly. This is where we're going to end today's episode, with the new phase, where we're going to see how this case is going to be investigated under a different light, and it's going to be compared with other unsolved mysteries. And there is a lot that we're going to find out from that. There's a lot of new evidence in this case that you need to know about. But how sad it is to know that the police at this point, I mean, and even back then, they didn't believe that this had anything to do with a murder, and that these investigations were treated in such bad ways that, you know, it's very hard for today's investigators to kind of come up with something. It's sad, and at the same time, it's hard for the investigators now trying to find out what really happened. But I think that there's a lot more that we're going to learn from this. So I hope that you join me in the next episode of this series as we go through more evidence in this unsolved mystery. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope that you join me next time, and I will see you guys soon.